Hello, everybody. I know it's been a while, but today is a special day, and, well, I figured I would stop working on some other projects to make a little video. Today would be Murray Rothbard's 100th birthday. He was born March 2nd, 1926, I believe. Pretty sure of that. And of course, if you're over at the Mises Institute or, any other libertarian place, hopefully they're all celebrating Rothbard's 100th birthday. But today I wanted to celebrate on my own a little bit, or at least celebrate with something to give to you guys. And what I want to talk about today is Rothbard wrote a ton. He wrote, Man, Economy, and State. He wrote tons of other books. He wrote many essays. He even did, funny movie reviews and things like that. So, today's a day that you can sit back and enjoy some Rothbard and have a good reason for just kind of relaxing and enjoying his inimitable style. Inimitable style. I think I had an extra syllable there the first time. Anyway, today I want to talk about a much less heralded article, because I can tell you to go read a 1,000-page book or whatever, but you probably won't. But this particular essay, and there's also essays like air pollution, and there's his essay on air pollution. There's he's written so many things, economics, politics, whatever. But this particular essay, I think, is underappreciated, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. This is an essay by Rothbard entitled "Do You Hate the State?" first published in the Libertarian Forum in 1977. Now, this essay is not some kind of explanation of an economic concept or a careful look at some kind of incentive structure, or some kind of small argument against some particular element of the state or statism itself. It is instead, I think, a very powerful article to kind of get the right mindset. Oftentimes people get into the mindset of saying, oh, well, government is doing things that I like, and so therefore the government is doing good things now. And this article does a very good job of helping to eliminate that self-destructive mindset. Because when the government does good things, it's doing those good things on a basis that allows them to do much more bad things later on. Now, if you're lucky, you won't live that long, but you might. And this essay, I think, is kind of like a defining moment for what you might call Rothbardian anarcho-capitalism. It separates itself, or in this article, or in this essay, Rothbard separates his particular brand, if you will, from other forms of libertarian philosophy with a very careful separation. He draws a very specific, very clear line between one type of libertarian and another. So, the other type of libertarian that Rothbard talks about is the people like David Friedman, who might be brilliant on their own, but, quote, merely arrived at the conviction that anarchism and competing private police forces are a better social and economic system than any other alternative. Anarcho-capitalism is superior, but superior to an existing political structure which is pretty good too, end quote. Now, the David Friedmans of the world compare one state to another and say, well, I'd rather live here than there. They spend a lot of time quibbling over which ones are the best and which ones are the worst. Rothbard, on the other hand, quote, hates the existing American state, or the state per se, hates it deep in his belly as a predatory gang of robbers, enslavers, and murderers, end quote. And that last bit, I think, is really worth repeating because it's very easy to forget when the government is kind of everywhere, right? Robbers, enslavers, and murderers. Because that's really the key to Rothbardian anarcho-capitalism. That's what the state really is. And the Rothbardian is unique in that he never loses sight of this fact, right? Even when the state does something that he somewhat approves of, he never forgets the mountain of injustices that slight good is based upon, and is caused alongside these tiny little advantages that happen every once in a while. The Rothbardian is more immune, maybe not immune, but more immune to the kind of team sports formulation of politics, the bread of kickbacks, the circus of election cycles, the opiate of winning, right? People complain that libertarian ideas never win, right? But politics, viewed by the Rothbardian, is not a question about winners and losers. It's a question of this mountain of skulls that exists behind both the winners and the losers of most elections. And any attempt to justify its existence has to look upon this mountain of skulls and say that those were worth it, right? That's the problem with approving of the state in any significant, meaningful way. Even when the state, by luck or happenstance, does something positive, it does so at a terrible cost that we must not lose sight of. Whether the winner loses a red font or a blue font for his campaign flyers, he's going to keep on building up that mountain of skulls. Why should we pretend that there's some huge moral difference between someone who pledges to kill 5% fewer innocents or rob 1% less from the people that they cow and indoctrinate and force to pay them? Whether one puts the words protect and serve or work will make you free over the camp doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the end. You still end up with that mountain of skulls. The state is like a man who robs and kidnaps and murders travelers on some road day in and day out. And once a year, he fixes a pothole somewhere on the trail. That one fixed pothole doesn't justify his methods. And even if you fixed 1 million potholes, it still wouldn't, right? That's the difference between like the utilitarian and the natural rights perspective on libertarianism. But it also doesn't matter if the state has managed to convince its enforcers that they're working for some general good or the benefit of their countrymen. Being taken in by propaganda, which is what the state does, right? That's what public education does. That propaganda does not absolve one of responsibility for one's actions. You might pity someone who's been so taken in by this line of propaganda that they really believe it, but we must recognize that, unfortunately, whether they are just taken in by propaganda or not, they're deadly serious about following those requirements. If they want to be seen as something other than sworn murderers in the making, because there's not a whole lot of difference between defending yourself against someone who's actually attacking you and someone who has a gun and says, I am going to kill you if I am given a lawful order, right? They can leave their positions, enforcing the dictates of that band of robbers, enslavers, and murderers, and they can get a job at legitimate voluntary security companies if they want to not be, hired guns for a band of enslavers, robbers, and murderers. Rothbard in this essay also laments that libertarianism, both anarchist and minarchist strains, are so full of people who feel little to no disdain for the state. That disdain for the state is a crucial element of Rothbard's perspective. He complains bitterly, quote, where are the Paines and Cobdens and Knox of today, end quote. He says, quote, far better one Albert Nock than 100 anarcho-capitalists who are all too comfortable with the existing status quo, end quote. Rothbard contrasts them with figures like Milton Friedman, who demands, quote, feasible methods of getting from here to there, end quote. But the problem with Milton Friedman is that he feels no horror when the state robs hundreds of millions of people every year, right? His demands are petty in the face of the enormous evil that is the coercive state. Paine, Cobden, and Nock, Rothbard explains, represent what he called the abolitionists. And they don't shy away from seizing feasible methods when they're available. But the abolitionist also, quote, keeps blazingly clear, end quote, his ultimate goals at all times. The destruction of the greatest organized evil in the history of mankind that also happens to command the most ill-placed respect. An abolitionist, Rothbard explains, it, quote, is a button pusher who would blister his thumb pushing a button that would abolish the state immediately if such a button existed, end quote. The abolitionist, in other words, recognizes that the agents of the state have made their pledges, and morality dictates that they have earned whatever that button gives them, whether it be, a change of heart or just a clip from scanners. Mercy and pity and strategy be damned. He will keep pressing the button as long as he can. In the absence of such a button, of course, mercy, pity, and strategy become more relevant. But at the very least, the abolitionist must never take his eyes off that mountain of skulls, must never give up on the indignation that its continued existence demands. The objective must always be to hack away at the evils which are inherent to the state: taxation, conscription, regulation, indoctrination, dominion. And the abolitionist is prepared to keep hacking until it is done. We must not fall into the mistake of believing that there can be victory through more aggression, but at the same time we must recognize with crystal clarity the differences between more and less aggression, and even more importantly, between aggression and self-defense. Because the state will always turn on you in the end, and our goal should be to build a peaceful, free future for our children, and not to damn them to dealing with that inevitable betrayal that the state always brings with it, just because it's easier for us. We must aspire, and maybe we won't reach, but we must aspire to the clarity and the ferocity with which Rothbard hammered on the vicious existence of the state in this particular essay, and in others, of course, but in this one in particular. If we don't, we risk falling for kind of the sweet false promises that the state will give us, and, its pet statists will tell us is what we actually deserve. So, this is a particularly good essay by Rothbard, and I think everybody who, wants to know Rothbard's perspective should read this essay, if not today, then when, right? It's more clear and more, like, what would you say? Like, it's more clear and it's more harsh than a lot of Rothbard's other writings, but at the same time, it's very well thought out. And so, if you're reading any Rothbard today or tomorrow or maybe this week, go check the link in the description. The article is available for free over at the Mises Institute. I'll have a link to it. You can go check it out, and read some Rothbard this week or this month. Enjoy it, because he is always a delight to read. Even when he's talking about air pollution and radio waves. So happy 100th birthday, Murray. I'm sorry that you aren't here to see it, but I hope that things continue to get better and less statist over time. And with that, I'll say thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I've been working on a couple of projects which have prevented me from making videos. With the usual unzeal that I had for it, but today was a special day, so I had to get this out. But I'm working on a book on Locke, and I'm working on some other videos that I think I might be able to mash together this month, maybe to make a few more fun videos about kind of Rothbardian anarcho-capitalism in honor of his 100th birthday. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.